إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. So in the previous lesson we looked at the second ayah mentioned by Shaykh-ul-Islam Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab rahimahullah within the first Naqid, and that is shirk with Allah Azza wa Jal. And the Shaykh gave as an illustrative example the issue of al-dhabh, which is sacrificing, like the one who sacrifices to a grave or a jinn. And the Shaykh Ubaid, whose explanation we were working through, he mentioned that the Shaykh simply alluded to this one example in order to indicate the whole. Because shirk, in terms of sacrifice, is an element of shirk, but he alluded to that one example, indicative of the whole, meaning all other shirk. And so to conclude his discussion, the Shaykh then went on to give 4 other manifestations of major shirk. And from them he discussed shirk of mahabbah, which was the second if we include al-dhabh, and that is where we finished our lesson last week. So inshallah ta'ala we are going to continue from this point onwards. So we had shirkul du'a was the first one, and then shirkul mahabba, which was the second one. So we'll continue today. So our next lesson, lesson number 6, starts from this point onwards. And this is the third type of shirk. Which is shirkut ta'ah. Shirkut ta'ah is the shirk of obedience. The shirk of obedience. Now what does it mean when we say shirkut ta'ah? And the answer to this question is, this is when a person takes an individual who he obeys in everything, such as when he makes something to be halal and when he makes something to be haram. So this is the general meaning of shirkut ta'ah, to obey, to erect a person whom one obeys, such that whatever he makes halal, he treats it as halal, and whatever he makes haram, he treats it as haram, and he obeys him in that respect. So the verse which alludes to this is a verse in Surah At-Tawbah. Allah Ta'ala, He said, اتخذوا أحبارهم ورهبانهم أربابا من دون الله والمسيح ابن مريم, to the end of the ayah. They took, referring to the Jews and the Christians, they took their priests and their rabbis as lords besides Allah. And in the Sunnah there has come an explanation of this ayah, and the companion Adi bin Hatim, and he used to be a Christian, and the Messenger of Allah, he recited this ayah, and Adi bin Hatim said, indeed we did not used to worship them, meaning the priests and the rabbis. So the Messenger of Allah, he responded, he said, أَلَيْسَ يُحَرِّمُونَ مَا أَحَلَّ اللَّهُ فَتُحَرِّمُونَهُ وَيُحِلُّونَ مَا حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ فَتَسْتَحِلُّونَهُ. Do they not, or did they not make haram what Allah made halal, such that you considered it to be haram? And did they not make halal what Allah made haram, such that you then considered it to be halal? And Adi said, yes, bala. And so the Messenger of Allah, he said, فَتِلْكَ عِبَادَتُهُمْ. This was their worship. Their worship. So it is clear then that this issue here of obedience in the halal and the haram constitutes major shirk by virtue of this ayah and by virtue of the hadith which clarifies the ayah. However, we must understand that the scholars have made an important distinction in relation to this issue of shirk al-ta'ah, something very important that we must understand, which is that we have two groups of people. We have those who alter the religion. They alter the religion. And this is what is being alluded to in the verse. When someone makes halal what is actually haram, and someone makes haram what is actually halal, and then that is accepted from that person until it becomes religion, or like religion which is followed, this then is an alteration of the religion. It is tabdeel of the religion. And this is how the deen of the Yahud, of the Jews, the deen of the Nasara, the Christians, how their religion became altered in that their priests and their rabbis, they departed from revelation, they judged with their opinions, they made lawful what was unlawful, they made unlawful what was lawful, and altered the religion, and they ascribed it to Allah. So all of this is tabdeel of the religion. Now the issue here then is, we are speaking of shirk al-ta'ah, obeying such people who engage in this. And the people who obey them, from the common folk who obey such people, such leaders, priests and rabbis, then they fall into two categories. And this is an important distinction we have to make, tafsil we have to make. And this distinction is made clear by Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, and here Shaykh Ubaid, he summarizes that distinction, and he says that those people who follow the ones who alter the religion, the ones who make tabdeel of the religion, they are of two types. So the first type are those who know that these priests and rabbis and these scholars and whoever else have made halal what is haram, and they have made haram what is halal. They know this, they have knowledge of this, they know that they have altered the religion, and they are making halal haram and haram halal. And they consider what they are doing to be lawful. Meaning that when one of those priests, rabbis or scholars says this is halal, whereas that was actually haram, so a person follows him believing and accepting, making istihlal, meaning considering in actual fact to be halal this thing which the Sharia has actually made haram, or to believe that such and such a thing is haram when the Sharia has actually made it halal. So here this following and obeying, this obedience isn't just mere obedience, it is obedience coupled with the belief that yes, indeed what the scholars have made halal is actually halal when it is haram. And indeed what the scholars have made haram is actually haram when in fact it is actually halal. Right? So they make this istihlal, they treat to be that which is unlawful to be lawful. And so these people are the ones who have taken their priests and their rabbis as lords, as arbab min dunillah, besides Allah, as indicated in the ayah. And these people are clearly, they are mushrikun. They are mushrikun. Their obedience here, this obedience is shirk al-ta'ah. It is the obedience of shirk. And even if these people, they pray and they fast, and they give various types of devotion to Allah, and they fall into this, then this is still shirk with Allah Azza wa Jal. And also, in order to worship someone, a person does not have to prostrate to that person, does not have to sacrifice to that person, does not have to offer various sacrifices and other types of devotion, because worship can also be in terms of obedience. And in this case, when it is coupled with this, this issue of accepting the halal to be halal, the haram to be halal, and the halal to be haram, and following them on that basis. So basically, you are following them in that tabdeel and affirming the tabdeel of the religion, the alteration of the religion. This now is shirk al-ta'ah. Now the second type are those who merely just obey in what is being made lawful and what is being made unlawful. And they have knowledge, they know that this thing is not actually halal in the Sharia, or it is not actually haram in the Sharia. They know this and they affirm this and they accept this. And they know that what they are being commanded with, whether it is the halal, they know that it is not so in the Sharia, that it is actually haram. Or that if it is something that these leaders, scholars, priests, rabbis, or whatever else are saying that it is haram, they know that it is not haram, it is actually halal. They know this, that they affirm what is in the Sharia. So they didn't. So when the priest or the rabbi says this is halal, they didn't say yes, we accept it is halal. They didn't say that. And when they said this is haram, they didn't say yes, we accept that it is haram. They didn't accept that. Rather, they knew that the Sharia says otherwise, but they merely obeyed them. They merely obeyed them. For example, a scholar or a ruler might say, drink alcohol. Drink alcohol. He might command his subjects, or he might command one of his subjects, but drink alcohol. So this person, he says, I know it's haram. I don't accept that it's halal. I know it's haram. But for whatever reason, out of fear, out of whatever reason it might be, or because he might have a love for that leader, or whatever reason it might be, whether it's fear, whether it's love, or whatever the underlying motivation, he drinks it. But he doesn't drink it on the basis that it is actually halal. Right? He has some other thing. As he said, he might just fear for himself, or it could be just pure out of sinfulness and the desire and wanting to drink, and it agrees with his desires, although he knows that it is haram. So this is what we are speaking of. This obedience now is not the obedience which is the same as the first type. This is obviously a major sin. It is obviously a major sin. And likewise, if an opposite command was given whereby the ruler or the leader said, do not eat meat, it is haram. Do not eat meat, it is haram. And we know in the Sharia it is halal. But this person, he doesn't eat. He obeys that command. He obeys, not from the angle that it is haram, but upon the angle that it's just obedience by itself. So this is not the shirk which expels a person from the fold of Islam. From the fold of Islam. Now, this type of shirk, so once we've made this clear, this type of shirk, we have to also understand, the Shaykh mentions a point here, that in the modern times, in contemporary times, it is this type of shirk that you find that the Khawarij and the people of dissension, the people of tribulation, that they are using this type of shirk in order to attack the scholars of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah. And they are claiming that you scholars, you never speak about this type of shirk, and all you do is you speak about the shirk of the tombs and the graves and the mausoleums, and this is what is known as shirk al-tashri', shirk al-ta'a, shirk al-qusur, meaning the shirk of the palaces, and you focus instead upon the shirk al-qubur, the shirk of the graves. And so you see this coming from the Khawarij and those types of groups. And they claim that this is, belittling the Aqidah and so on and so forth. And this is one of the angles that we see the Khawarij coming from today. And, they say that the scholars have not fulfilled their obligation, and that they have sold out, and that they are pawns of the rulers, and also all sorts of things which are like this. And all of this is a clear lie. They are telling lies, because clearly here you can see that the scholars of Ahlul Sunnah, all of our scholars, they have outlined these issues, they've discussed these issues, they've included these issues in their books, and they've elaborated upon these issues, and we see them clearly. Here we see Shaykh Ubaid, we see Shaykh al-Fawzan, we see all the scholars of Ahlul Sunnah. They discuss this issue of shirk al-ta'a. But the difference is that they make the important distinction that we find the likes of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn al-Qayyim, and the scholars after that, and likewise the scholars of the da'wah, we find they make the distinction too. And so they speak about these issues, but with tafsil, with detail, with evidence. As for the Khawarij, then they are speaking with generalizations, because obviously the foundation of the deen is to make takfir of the rulers, consider Islam to be non-existent, claim that we have to topple all regimes and authorities and establish an authority, meaning they will establish the authority, and that will be the restoration of Islam. And therefore, everyone else who does not agree with this idea, this doctrine, that person too is a disbeliever, whether ruler or ruled, whether scholar or ignoramus. And this is how they operate. And so therefore, because the scholars speak about this issue with tafsil, and they say, well, yes, there is shirk al-ta'ah, which is major shirk, and there is that which is major sin, which does not expel from the fold of Islam. Then this is not liked by the Khawarij because it comes in the way of their evil methodology. So the scholars, as the Shaykh says, they have fulfilled their obligation. Their books are filled with advice to the rulers, to the subjects on this issue, and they convey the foundations of the religion. They don't, leave anything. And likewise, everything they speak about ikhlas to Allah, the obligation of making mutaba'ah, following the messenger of Allah, and opposing whatever opposes that. All of that is essentially speaking about this issue, the obligation of obedience to Allah and His Messenger. So how can they claim, and how can they say that scholars have neglected this duty? So this was shirk al-ta'ah, the third type. And we move to the fourth type, the final type that the Shaykh mentions, and this is shirk al-niyya wal-qasd wal-irada. And this is the shirk as it pertains to intentions, desires, motivations, these types of affairs. And what is intended by this then is that a man or a woman performs deeds of righteousness, of nearness to Allah, but he does not really seek the face of Allah nor the reward of Allah in the hereafter. So this action is not being directed to another deity. Let's be clear, because as we mentioned before, that there are two issues. One is that you direct worship only to Allah. So a person, instead of sacrificing to a wali or a tomb or a jinn, he sacrifices only to Allah. Right? So this now is directing ibadah only to Allah. But then there's a second issue, which is, what is the underlying motivation in that action? So he's doing that action, he's directing it to Allah. What does he want from it? Does he want to please Allah and want reward in the hereafter? Or is he looking for praise and recognition and showing off and some other aspects of the dunya? This now is the type of shirk that we are speaking of, the shirk of the niyyah, of irada, of qasd. And so here the worship is being directed to Allah, not to others, but what is a person intending behind it? What does he want? And who does he want it from? Is he trying to please Allah, and does he want reward from Allah? Or is he trying to impress and please the people and want their recognition? And so this then here is the shirkun niyya wal qasd wal irada. And a person might want some of the affairs of the world, beneficial interests of the world, such as being praised, being remembered, being extolled, and so on and so forth. So this then is shirk, even if the person is not expressing words of shirk, and even if in his deeds there is no shirk. Right? So you can see this man, he's clearly doing an act of worship just for Allah, from what we see apparently and outwardly. And there's no apparent shirk that we see from this man. Likewise, there's nothing in his speech that entails shirk, which are words of shirk. But his niyyah, his irada, it is a shirkul khafi. A shirkul khafi. It is the hidden shirk. The hidden shirk. And that's why shirk then, when we speak of shirk, it is of three types. There is shirk akbar, Ash-shirkul akbar, the major shirk which expels a person from Islam and makes him a mushrik. There is ash-shirkul asghar, the minor shirk, and which refers to ways and means which in and of themselves are not shirk, but they are statements that a person makes, or states or feelings of the heart, or perhaps certain actions that are means that lead to major shirk. Right? That is what enters into minor shirk. The ways and means that lead a person to, or which are avenues towards the eventual commission of major shirk. That's a shirkul asghar. And as for this type, the third type, it is a shirkul khafi, the hidden shirk, or ar-riya, and what is like that, which is the inner intentions and motivations behind a person's deeds. Now, the evidence for this in the Quran is an ayah in Surah Hud, to ayat 15 and 16, Surah 11 verse 15 and 16. من كان يريد الحياة الدنيا وزينتها نوفي إليهم أعمالهم فيها وهم فيها لا يبخسون أولئك الذين ليس لهم في الآخرة إلا النار وحبط ما صنعوا فيها وباطل ما كانوا يعملون. Whoever desires the life of the world and its glitter, we shall pay them in full. We shall pay their deeds in full therein, and they will not be dealt with unjustly, or have anything left short for them. They are the ones who will have nothing in the hereafter but the fire, and vain will be that which they did, and in falsehood was that which they used to do. So this ayah here, it's even though this verse is referring to the outright disbelievers, then the scholars use such ayat in order to point out attributes in which there is resemblance between the disbelievers and between a Muslim who might share in some of those characteristics, right? Because a believer can share in certain characteristics which are the characteristics of the people of kufr because of their disbelief. And from them is to do deeds for show and seeking the glitter of the world, seeking praise, and that's what we see with them in the life. This is all what it is for them. It is glitter, show, fame, fortune, praise, doing deeds for others. This is what you have when you disbelieve in Allah and disbelieve in the hereafter. And so when a person, he directs an act of worship to Allah but desiring something other than Allah's pleasure, right, then he has resembled those people. He has resembled those people, the people of disbelief. And so this shirk that we are speaking of then is, first of all, shirk. So basically the shirk that is being referred to in this ayah, therefore, is first of all pure shirk, which is the shirk of the people of disbelief, in that a person is just simply after the dunya and has no concern at all in anything for Allah, for the hereafter. All of his deeds are for show, glitter, fame, fortune, so on and so forth. And so this clearly is shirkul akbar. And that the second type is the type what we are discussing here is shirkul riya, of showing off. A person, the worship he's directing it to Allah, but in his intentions inside, it is for Allah and for other than Allah. Right? So he wants praise from the people. Right? He wants praise from the people, though the action outwardly it is directing it to Allah. So here now he's made a partner with Allah. And so this deed then will be vain and false. And the Shaykh mentioned that this issue is clarified in detail in his explanation of Kitab al-Tawheed. And just to quickly mention that the types of issues that the Shaykh is alluding to is, for example, a person in whose all of his actions are riya. This now is a disbeliever, a hypocrite, like the hypocrites do, right? The majority of their actions are for show, and so this is a major shirk and disbelief. As for a believer, then only small amounts of riya take place with respect to a believer, right? In an instance, in an action, or whatever, and then he repels it. So this is not major shirk. Likewise, also the scholars discuss an issue about, okay, what if a person is doing a righteous deed, he's praying, for example, halfway through, he has a feeling of riya. What happens now? And is all of his is all of his prayer vain now or false, or so these are the types of issues that the scholars discuss when they discuss this issue, and a person can refer back to Kitab al-Tawheed, the explanation of Kitab al-Tawheed, of which the Shaykh is alluding to his own explanation, where he's clarified these issues in some detail. So continuing on from that point, he says that we will finish with one more point, or a few more points in relation to the shirk, that this shirk in all of its types is evil, and it is reprehensible, and it leads to a person to an evil end, a truly evil end. Even if this person is fasting, praying, giving zakah, making pilgrimage, making hajj, claiming that they are Muslims, Allah will not accept any action from them. Right? And this is the evil consequences of shirk, that it makes all of the other actions to be vain. Nothing is accepted. وَقَدِمْنَا إِلَى مَا عَمِلُوا مِنْ عَمَلٍ فَجَعَلْنَاهُ حَبَاءً مَنْثُورًا. We shall turn to whatever deeds they did and turn them into scattered dust. Surah Al-Furqan 25 verse 23. So meaning that we will turn to their actions, all of the actions by which they were seeking nearness to Allah, and in which they were actually, but they had shirk with them. فَجَعَلْنَاهُ حَبَاءً مَنْثُورًا. We shall turn them into scattered dust. So this is an extremely severe threat, a threat that all of one's deeds will be vain if a person, commits shirk with Allah.
We're talking about general shirk or shirk khafi.
No, here this now is the major shirk. Yeah, so we finished shirkul khafi, the fourth type. Now this is just finishing off, generally speaking, about major shirk. Yeah. So shirk khafi, from it is that which can be major shirk when it is overwhelmingly in all of a person's actions, like we find with the hypocrites. But then from it is that which is not so. So once we've finished those four types.
Some scholars say that it's just two types of shirk.
Three. Well, some scholars enter shirk khafi into shirk asghar, but some make it an independent category. It's a different category, yeah. So this indicates, so what we're finishing now is just finishing off a few closing notes on the severity of shirk itself, major shirk. Another angle is that shirk makes all of the actions to be vain and invalidated, and the actions of a mushrik, they will not have any weight with Allah. So another ayah is in Surah Zumar, Surah 39 verse 65. وَلَقَدْ أُوحِيَ إِلَيْكَ وَإِلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكَ لَإِنْ أَشْرَكْتَ لَيَحْبَطَنَّ عَمَلُكَ وَلَتَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. It has indeed been revealed to you and to those before you that if you were to commit shirk, your actions would be vain and you would be among the losers in the hereafter. So here, Allah Azza wa Jal is informing His Prophet ﷺ that from the affairs that He revealed to previous messengers and prophets, all of them, He revealed to them two things: that if they commit shirk, their actions will be vain, and secondly, they will be losers. Actions will be nullified and you will be losers in the hereafter. This is an emphasis. Not only does it mention the wastage of actions, because a person's actions may be wasted, but it might be made up with something else. Rather, Allah Azza wa Jal, He added to that, emphasizing that by adding to the end that they will be from the khasireen, from the losers. So the actions will be vain and you will be from the losers. This is an emphasis, a double emphasis. And so this means that a person will not have any hope whatsoever, and there will be nothing left once his actions have been invalidated if he commits shirk with Allah Azza wa Jal, to cut off all hope. And so this is what we take from that ayah, the severity of the situation with shirk. And then a final question someone might say and ask, well, how come has the Prophet ﷺ has been addressed with such a discourse, with such a statement? And we know that it is agreed upon amongst the scholars of the religion that the prophets are infallible from falling into major sins like shirk and likewise from falling into the major sins, and likewise from falling into some of the minor sins which are like of a severe nature. Some of the minor sins. That does not mean that some of the prophets cannot fall into minor sins. Some prophets can fall into minor sins, but they do not persist upon them, and they make tawbah and they make istighfar. And so this is the belief of Ahlul Sunnah with respect to the messengers in this respect. So the question is, how come this has been addressed to the Prophet ﷺ and those before, when we know that they do not fall into shirk, obviously, they do not commit major sin, and for the most part, they do not fall into those minor sins. So the answer to that is that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ is being addressed because he is the Imam of the Ummah. He is the leader of the Ummah. And he is the one who conveys from Allah Azza wa Jal the commands and prohibitions and whatever information Allah reveals to him. So the address has been directed to the Messenger of Allah because he is the recipient of revelation. Even though we know that he does not commit shirk, neither do the prophets and messengers before him commit shirk, nor do they fall into major sin. But this is to show the severity of the issue of shirk. That if any of them had fallen into shirk, their actions too would be vain and nullified. Even though we know that Allah Azza wa Jal has chosen them and protected them, and they do not do such a thing. And this is to show the severity and the gravity of the issue of shirk itself. And also what indicates the severity of shirk is the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, وَمَنْ يُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ فَكَأَنَّمَا خَرَّ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ فَتَخْطَفُهُ الطَّيْرُ أَوْ تَحْوِي بِهِ الرِّيحُ فِي مَكَانٍ سَحِيقٍ. The one who commits shirk with Allah, it is as if he has been snatched from the sky. He's fallen from the sky, and so he's snatched by birds, or he's thrown by the wind into some remote distant place. Surah Al-Hajj, Surah 22, verse number 31. So again, what does this ayah show? It shows how far away is a mushrik from Allah Azza wa Jal. A mushrik is far away from Allah Azza wa Jal. And that by way of his actions, which are vain and nullified, obviously, this person, as if he is falling from the sky. He's falling from the sky. The birds snatch him, or he falls into some remote, far distant place where no one can ever reach, no one can find him, such that he can be saved. Right? This is his similitude. This is what he is like. And from Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, and just to finish on the fact that the abode of the mushrikeen is the fire. Hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, we were with the Messenger of Allah sallallahu when he heard a noise. And the Prophet said, do you know what that was? تَدْرُونَ مَا هَذَا? They said, Allah and His Messenger know best. He said, this was a stone that was thrown in the fire since 70 autumns. And it is continuing to fall into the fire until now, when it hit the bottom. Hadith reported by Muslim. So just indicating finally here the destination and the abode of the mushrik. It is in the likes of this place whose depths are like what is illustrated in this hadith. So this then is the conclusion, the end of Shaykh Ubaid's explanation of this first naqid, and he finished by indicating the severity of shirk and the consequences of shirk by way of these ayat in the Quran. This now leads us now to the second naqid, and we return back to Shaykh Muhammad Aman al-Jami, who has a very extremely short comment to just one page, and so we'll make a start on that. الناقد الثاني من جعل بينه وبين الله وسائط يدعوهم ويسألهم الشفاعة ويتوكل عليهم كفر إجماعا. So the second nullifier, the one who makes or places or who erects between himself and Allah intermediaries, wasa'it, intermediaries, calling upon them. he invokes them, he calls upon them, he asks them for shafa'ah, and he relies upon them, then he disbelieves by way of ijma'. By ijma', he becomes a disbeliever. So the Shaykh, rahimahullah, he says that those who take intermediaries, wasa'id, and they believe that these intermediaries are the ones who will benefit them with Allah, benefit them in the presence of Allah, and claim that they themselves are not fit, they're not worthy, they themselves are not worthy of calling upon Allah directly. Rather, they need someone whom they place between themselves and between Allah. This is the general way of thinking, right? The way of thinking, the mentality of these people. We are sinful people, we are evil people, we have such a low status. Who are we to call upon Allah? We need someone who has a position and a status with Allah. And these awliya, these righteous people, these pious people, they have a standing with Allah, they are pious with Allah, and Allah listens to them, and so on and so forth. So we must only go to Allah through them. So therefore, they are our intermediaries, and we ask of them, and we direct our supplications through them. Right? This is the general mentality that these people have in their minds. Now, this mentality, how is this and why is this shirk with Allah Azza wa Jal? The Shaykh goes on that to explain that this is resembling Allah with the kings of the world. This is resembling Allah with the kings of the world. Because, and Shaykh-ul-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he elaborates upon this as well, and we see here that when we look at how the kings of the world operate, how do the kings of the world operate? There are certain qualities of the kings of the world, and these people who have these wasa'id, these intermediaries, they are resembling Allah with these kings of the world. So let's just stop and reflect about the kings of the world. Number one, the kings of the world are such that they are ignorant of the affairs of their subjects. They have to be informed, right? They have to be informed by their ministers, by those who inform them, by whatever statistics, and they themselves are ignorant of the state of affairs of their servants. That's number one. Number two, the ministers who are between them, who are intermediaries between them and between the people, like we have ministers, in whatever various types and forms of government you have across the country, you have ministers that go between and represent the people. The ministers are the ones who at any time they can come and they can intercede on behalf of the people with the king or with the prime minister or with the president or with the leader. They can just come in, don't need permission. I think we should do this. I think you should do that. I think you should do this. I think you should do that. Or maybe you should do this for those people. How about these? Right? So he's interceding with the king without his permission. He doesn't need permission. He just come and say and do as he likes. That's the second quality. The third quality is that the kings of the world, often, they are moved by fear in order to do something for their people, for their subjects. Either they fear the pressure from the ministers, or they fear a backlash from the people, and so therefore these are the real reasons why often they might do certain things, right, for their people. This is the nature of the kings of the world. They are ignorant of the affairs of their subjects unless they are informed. Number two, their ministers can come and intercede whenever they want, however they want, don't need permission. And thirdly, the king is often fearful. He has fear. Right? So when these people come and they have this mentality and they speak like this and they think that Allah can only be approached by intermediaries, just like in the world, we achieve things by way of intercession. We go and send someone else to intercede with someone else, right, who are most likely to, they are likely to listen to. Person wants to borrow money, you go and send someone else because that person has a favor with that person, and you ask him, right? This is how things operate in the world. So here, this is tashbih. They are resembling Allah, Lord of the worlds, with the kings and the leaders. And all of this, is falsehood. Allah Azza wa Jal is not in need of any minister, any aider, any wakil, anything like this. And all of this is having an evil suspicion of Allah Azza wa Jal. It is resembling Him to the weak creatures, the kings of the world. And these people, when they do so, when they have this idea in their minds, they then, obviously this is tashbih between Allah and His creation, first of all. And on top of that, then, they make dua to the dead, they place tawakkul upon the dead, because now their deliverance in the hereafter, fulfillment of their needs, it is by way of these intermediaries. So the tawakkul, instead of being upon Allah Azza wa Jal and the ways and the means Allah has legislated, meaning taking the ways and means and making tawakkul upon Allah, now the tawakkul is now upon these intermediaries. The hearts become attached to these intermediaries, and they seek to please the intermediaries, they invoke them, they ask the intermediaries to make dua for them, and so on and so forth. And this is what you see with the Sufis. People who are nurtured by the Sufis, this is what they come out with, this type of mentality. And so they rely upon their sheikhs and their walis and so on and so forth in a complete way, expecting them and anticipating from them that these walis and these people will save them on Yawmul Qiyamah by, interceding with Allah on their behalf. Right? This is how they treat them. That this is how they see their religion. That it is all about intermediaries gaining favor with them, and gaining acceptance from them and pleasing them. So that on Yawmul Qiyamah, these intermediaries are the ones who will save them. Right? And so this then itself is, whoever worships Allah or claims to worship Allah in this manner through these intermediaries, this is an invalidation of Islam. This is an invalidation of his Islam. And this person has not understood Tawheed. And so a Muslim must be aware and keep away from this this type of shirk. So this is what Sheikh Muhammad Aman al-Jami has to say in summary, in essence. And what we'll do is we'll conclude our lesson there at this point today, inshallah ta'ala, and we'll begin fresh with the commentary of Sheikh Ubaid al-Jabri upon this naqid in the next lesson, inshallah. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.